Welcome to Good News Week. And the big news? Here it is, the last night of the federal election that time forgot. It's too close to call, it's even odds, it's a photo finish, it's anyone's guess. It's a bloody cliche looking for somewhere to happen. As we go to air, the polls say it's going to go right down to the wire. The wire David Oldfield uses to control Pauline Hanson. The only big swing has been to the don't know vote. Unfortunately, this includes all the politicians. After 5 weeks of campaigning, when smiling strangers come to the door with leaflets, you'll weep with relief if it's the Mormons. As the election entered the final week, things started to get very weird. Kim Beazley smooching a fish was a bizarre election stunt, almost as strange as Donald MacDonald smooching John Howard. Still, Beazley's minders thought kissing a fish was a better bet because the last time Kim kissed a baby, it took a good 15 minutes of the Heimlich manoeuvre before he coughed it back up. Victoria's gas crisis has worsened, with most consumers now facing another 10 days without gas and the prospect of rationing well into next year. Which means a few more days without a decent shower and everyone is going to have hair like Jeff Kennett. The gas crisis will cost the state billions, undermine the running of hospitals, schools and public transport, and drag on for months. Gee, if it had an opening ceremony, it'd be just like the Olympics. The Vics were hoping to get more gas from New South Wales, but Sydney used too much boiling its water. The good news is Melbourne is now expanding its use of electricity. They're bringing in some engineers from Auckland. John Howard has admitted his angry speech to the National Reconciliation Conference last year, which prompted hundreds of Aborigines and their supporters to turn their backs, was one of the biggest mistakes of his term. I tell you what, when it comes to conversions, the last week of an election campaign has a better hit rate than the road to Damascus. In a sense, while the Prime Minister didn't exactly apologise to the stolen generation, he did publicly express his regret for making the speech in which he didn't say sorry. Warms your heart, doesn't it? Howard says he was caught off guard. He didn't realise that a conference on Aboriginal reconciliation would have all those Aborigines at it. As the Northern Territory voted on statehood this week, locals have been calling for public debate on a new name. It's up the top, in the middle, sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's wet. They could call it clitoris. Of course, only female tourists would ever find it. But what about New Southeast Timor? Nah, that'd be asking for trouble. Over the years, the territory has been traversed by many famous explorers. So what about a name synonymous with great travellers? Colstonia. And that's the good news!
It's Good News Week. Someone's dropped a bomb somewhere contaminating atmosphere and blackening the sky. It's Good News Week. Someone's found a way to get the rotting dead a will to live for one and never die. It's Good News Week. It's Good News Week.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening tonight. As I can't believe we're on the eve of election, the visionary Mikey Robbins, the wolf in lawyer's clothing, perspicacious James O'Loughlin, and the national president of the Australian Labor Party, the wise old Barry Jones! I honestly don't believe we've had anyone booing before.
It was affectionate.
Ah, well, at his age it could have been gas. I'm not a Victorian.
And they're ready for the fight of their life with the noble Julie McCrossan, the retiring Speaker of the House of Representatives, the mythical Ian Sinclair, and the Deputy Leader of the Australian Democrats, the righteous Senator Natasha Stott-Despoja! First call, Mikey James Barry. What's the story?
Ayatollah Khamenei. Right.
No,
That's the second Ayatollah.
that's Khatami, the new,
That's Khatami.
the new president.
Yeah. It's Ayatollah you once, Ayatollah you twice, Ayatollah you 3 times! Once, twice, 3 times an Ayatollah. I love you.
Come on, Barry, bring some sophistication to this.
Khatami has decided to have the new look in Iranian foreign policy. They're getting back to be good guys again, and they want trade sanctions lifted, and as a result, they're withdrawing the fatwa against Salman Rushdie for having written satanic verses.
Which is a very dull book anyway.
No, it's a very good book. The reason that Margaret Thatcher refused to support it...
I knew this was going to happen.
One of the most damning portraits isn't the one on the Imam. I mean, that is very funny stuff. The best thing of all is the satire on Margaret Thatcher herself. Even more deadly is the picture of the Imam sitting in his room in Paris, listening to a tape recording all the time. And wanting to talk to and stuff.
I very rarely say this, but just a little bit too much information there. You had it in the first 5. OK, 5 points. Let's hear it. On his own.
You see the trouble that Bob Dyer had all those years ago?
A lot of them weren't alive then.
I know this sounds implausible, but there was a program with small boxes and questions, and that man knew all the answers.
And he still does, by the sound of it. After 10 years, the Iranian government has vowed that the fatwa imposed on Salman Rushdie by the Ayatollah Khomeini is over. Rushdie will no longer have to wear elaborate disguises and work under an alias. He said the past 2 years with the identity Monica Lewinsky had been particularly difficult. Apparently one of his old disguises was so good his wife used to fantasize she was having sex with Salman Rushdie.
Did he take the disguise of Monica Lewinsky just because he wanted to keep his head down?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to explain that to Ian Sims.
Thank you. Now, what did he...
You know, Julie, I don't think you do.
Look, where did the desk come into it?
Salman has spent his first week of freedom doing normal things like driving. Driving around, just driving around. Around a mosque with his hand on the horn and his blasphemous buttocks pressed hard against the window. Julie, Ian, Natasha, news just to hand.
OK, doctors in an operating theatre, reflective thinker, odd glasses.
It's that guy from the Addams Family.
60 Minutes, once again, pulled off the special of the decade, but they managed to get this guy and they've put a dead hand onto him. It's the first transplant of a hand in the world. No, not a transplant's not a dead hand. This is giving a man...
It was a dead hand. It is a hand.
Well, it was from a
They gave him a hand.
person. Hand that one to you, Mikey. But, I mean, hopefully this fellow, a Kiwi, I understand, who lost his hand 10 years ago, is now going to be able to use his hand. Well, that's the aim of the operation, yes.
Has someone thought about this with heart?
I'll tell you one thing, Paul. I mean, if it was me, how can I put this delicately? I don't know if I'd be demanding on having a man's hand.
You don't want to get that one.
No, I don't get that either.
No.
Conjures up all sorts of images. Now, I don't know what part of you can you see going on to Barry, or what sort of part of Barry can you see going to you? I mean, it doesn't really bring up images of the possibilities of tomorrow.
I think we should get away from this topic before it gets really vulgar. 5 points!
Dr. Earl Owen from this very city.
Earl Owen.
From Sydney.
Sydney, Earl Owen. He knew that.
Another 3 points.
You are a greedy, greedy man. Sydney surgeon, as you heard from Barry, Earl Owen, has made, and he'll probably get everything right over the course of the night, Earl Owen has made medical history by transplanting the hand of a dead man onto a living amputee. The surgeons declared the operation a tremendous success. Sure, Clint Hallam did wake up with a left hand on his right stump, but a physiotherapist should be able to fix that. When Hallam examined his new hand, he was amazed. Apparently he has to call Susie and buy milk. But it hasn't all been good news. He had his new palm read and found out he was due to die a week ago.
And apparently he found out he was married.
Clint said it'd be just nice to go to the local pool and not swim around in circles all day. Short recess to check tonight's strange but true clues. Robbins, O'Loughlin and Jones have cake,
Yum.
handcuffs,
Not yum.
and eyebrows.
I didn't know you looked like Ming before that.
Say the GST is a good thing.
Can I borrow them for a second? Because the absolute beauty of them is it's an all-purpose Liberal Party disguise kit. Because you go, John Howard, David Kemp.
And McCrossan, Sinclair and Stock Despoyar were given presents, a spear, and a voodoo doll.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I like Neil Diamond. I don't know that.
I hope this doesn't start a trend with all politicians impersonating other politicians. In round 2 tonight, Barry and Ian will face each other one last time on the battleground that is Don't Quote Me. Mr. Jones, what's all this about?
We're going to the Gosford Leagues Club.
That applies to me as it does to everybody else, and I wouldn't want it otherwise.
At this stage, I don't know.
Well, that's the charismatic Jim Lloyd, the Liberal member
Who's going to
for
win the seat of
Robertson.
Robertson, precisely.
Well, he's being challenged by an excellent Labor candidate, a former senator, Belinda
That's
Neal.
their disadvantage.
And what happened was that
That's the really good thing. Oh, sorry. That's the
they
really
were
good thing.
proposing to have
Not to Jim.
they were proposing to have an election meeting at an old people's home in Gosford, but it was to be an election booth on the Saturday, and it breached the law to have an election meeting and something within 5 days of the due date. So they had to get the old people, put them in buses, and bus them off to the Gosford Leagues Club, where they were to hear the Prime Minister. Hooray!
But, mate, this is probably the first time in years they've been taken out in a bus.
And the worst part for the Prime Minister is that in his speech he had to time his lines between jackpots.
Oh, but you always get jackpots when you vote for the Liberal Party, isn't it?
Oh, he's brought it back. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 points there for Barry Jones. Here it is, Mr. Jones. 5 busloads of old folks were forced to decamp from their retirement home this week because the launch of the government's elderly policy would have broken a law about campaigning at polling booths. Howard's minders weren't too happy, but the retirement home staff thought it was great. The trip to hear the Prime Minister speak was like an outing and an afternoon nap all in one. Many pensioners were apparently unwilling to get on the bus. They were afraid the home would be closed by the time they got back. But this is the closest John has come to breaking the law since he was a reckless 19-year-old and nearly gave himself the same double word score twice in a game of Scrabble.
This is not
Are
true.
you pointing at me, Barry?
The award-winning biography by David Barnett and Prue Goward points out that he did once break the law. When he gave up smoking, he was driving along in a car and he made a sudden decision and he threw the packet out of the window.
That was even before Lee Kuan Yew introduced it into Singapore, so there wasn't a law against it.
Do you get a sense of what the Constitutional Convention was like?
It must have been such great fun.
It was.
But the Prime Minister's speech went very well. He was actually cheered from the room with a rousing chorus of, "Bingo, what's for pudding?" And I've fallen and can't get up. Mr. Sinclair, to what do all these people refer?
It's a target that we'll be held to by the Australian people.
He wants to be the man who's got a target, yet it's not really a target.
We'll be judged by whether or not we get to that target, and we can live with that judgment.
We are not going to try and fool the public by setting a target.
It's bipartisan archery.
Well, I knew I was given the spear for some reason. But, I mean, we all know that one of the fundamental problems of this campaign is trying to see what you can do about employment. And both Kim and John believe that they have a solution. The trouble is Kim wants to set targets, and the trouble with Kim's targets is that he wants 2 parliamentary terms in order to implement the targets. Yet he's saying to John, you can only have 1 term, because he wants to win the election on Saturday.
He's already had one.
He's already had one.
Yes, he's had one, but he's saying to John he can't have another one. Now, I find it interesting, but Kim's essentially saying that he's got a target and he believes he can make the target, and John's saying you can't set targets because targets are not the way by which you solve employment. for my money, I think that I'll stick with John.
What's the target in question here?
The target was 5%.
5%.
People. Seriously, I thought it was they wanted 5% of people to shop at Target.
But the GST target is 10.
But your wholesale sales tax is 32% on something.
Look, if you boys don't stop, I'll turn this car around right now. And no one gets to go to the water slide.
Another 3 points there for Ian Sinclair! Kim Beazley says Labor has half a chance of success with its 5% unemployment target. A politician who only half believes in one of his election promises. That puts him 50% above the normal standard. But be fair, Kim only said he had a plan to reduce unemployment. He didn't say the plan would actually work. Beazley says he wants this to be perfectly clear. The 5% unemployment figure is an objective which they aim to turn into a plan as soon as they've reached the goal of forming an intent based on a design intended to hit a target. Political promises were so much better in the old days. LAW law. No GST, never ever. Now they were promises. They didn't create any hope, but they did give everyone a damn good laugh. The nasty surprise in round 3 is 7 days in 7 seconds. Be afraid, be very afraid. Okay, let's do it.
Paula Jones and...
Wait a second! Gee, no wonder you won that pick-a-box program. Okay, here we go. Barry, James, Mikey, first story.
Paula Jones and her lawyer saying that, well, they are prepared to compromise with the president and that providing you pay some hush money...
Yeah, $500,000, wasn't it?
It's a $1 million settlement, isn't it? Oh, I think...
I'd settle for less than that for you, Mr. McDougall. I'm so sorry. There's something about sitting next to Ian Sinclair that got me aroused, and then
Natasha, Ian, Julie, second story.
Brian Harry getting into a very small Fiat.
No, it was a go-go mobile.
He's getting into his car. This is a man who said he wasn't going to run for Parliament, but now he's going to run again because there's all this support for him. Oh, yeah.
Of course there is.
I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to throw it over here.
Okay, was it Madeleine Albright next?
Yeah, it was Madeleine Albright. And she was standing up. There's no doubt about that.
Madeleine Albright has joined Sherbert for the reunion song.
We know it. We know it.
No, we knew it. He knows it. He's a genius.
But the story's all about what's happening today. I mean, Bill Clinton has Netanyahu and Yasser Arafat talking again about the Oslo Accord.
I got to give it to him. Back to you for number 4.
After a historic 25 years, Cole doesn't get a 5th term as Chancellor. Gerhard Schroeder is in with his...
Yes, you're right. I'm going to give it to you.
Next one is Bob Brown saying he's going to direct preferences to Labor and he thinks that Labor will win the election.
Yeah, and he had funny glasses on. Bonus point.
Yes.
Okay, number 6.
We've really been concerned to make the submarines actually go down and come up. But Kim Beazley is saying,
to, like,
no matter
bubble on
about
the
that, we're going to
surface.
build more submarines anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last story, anybody?
Pauline Hanson running away from the press.
Yes, press conference.
conference,
David
Margot
Oldfield
King
posted in
the
the media
Fairfax
because their
Press named as
costumes...
anarchist.
Has she finished a press conference yet? And actually,
No, she hasn't given one yet.
Yes.
A one-page budget, and that's a lot less reading for the media.
I think you both got that one pretty well. The stories were lawyers for Paula Jones are close to finalising a rumoured $1 million settlement from Bill Clinton, who has even offered to throw in a box of cigars. Brian Harradine now says he'll vote against the full sale of Telstra and may also change his mind on WIC, unfair dismissal laws and Australia's involvement in the Boer War.
It's amazing, Paul. When he pulls up, 35 little Brian Harradines get out of that car as well.
The third one, the US government reignites the Middle East peace process in the hope it just might stop Israel and the PLO from reigniting each other. Helmut Kohl is replaced by Gerhard Schroeder, best known for his Italian suits, big cigars and mad rooting habits, which puts Germany 3 years behind Australia and 6 years behind the US. Bob Brown says his party will direct crucial preferences to Labor in more than 90% of cases, but Cheryl Curnow can kiss his green Tasmanian buttocks. Labor vows to beef up defence with 2 new submarines, but says the design for the Collins-class sub with the sunroof will be changed. And after One Nation's campaign launch turns into a complete farce, the polls show David Oldfield's career may get a media blackout of its own. And at the end of that extraordinary round, 3 points and 4 points.
You know why it's called a Collins-class submarine? Because its dimensions are based on Bob Collins' waist measurements.
Mikey.
He might have actually been on the same side of a plane on a flight to Canberra. We circled Canberra Airport for a good hour. Eventually 10 stewardesses had to lean out the other side. Bring it in.
When journalists were less than thrilled by One Nation's pathetic policy costings document at the launch, Oldfield called police and attempted to have them arrested. But Pauline Hanson couldn't give more detailed costing because a few people didn't turn up to the special adding up meeting. And she ran out of fingers. And a few of the people who were at the meeting didn't even have all their fingers. But they were balanced out by the people who had extra fingers. But can you blame One Nation for getting angry at the media? I mean, it's a bit rude asking a party for policy costings when they haven't even worked out the policies. I mean, that's what's been missing from this election. The element of surprise. What we need are instant, scratchy ballot papers. You go into a booth with a 20-cent piece, scratch the box next to the candidates' names, and you find out who you voted for. Oh, damn, I got the Democrats again. Come on, be violent.
No, not.
Do something aggressive.
As long as they're voting
can't.
Democrat, I don't care whether they like it or not. Thank you.
The amateur Robinses are now on 11 points. The backward McCrossans on 12 big points. OK, final call. Mikey James Barry, your strange but true clues were the cake, the handcuffs.
I had these on him, so he couldn't eat it.
And the eyebrows.
They are funny. The cake represents, of course, it's a yellow cake, so we're assuming uranium, we're assuming Jabiluki.
Yep.
We're talking police action, and the eyebrows?
93 John Howard look-alike. Wearing the characteristic John Howard mask.
And they're all throwing cigarette packets out of
They were arrested, and apparently when they were arrested, they all gave their name as John Howard. Which why about the 91st John Howard? I mean, I felt sorry for the cop. You know, it's like, name, yes, John Howard. Very, very funny, Ferrell. Mind you, they were faced with the choices. Either 93 of them could go as John Howard, or they could gaffer tape all 93 and go as Kim Beazley.
All the cops had to do was to round up all those ferals, was just get a big magnet, and suddenly that'll, you know, their eyebrows.
Actually, it's funny because normally the way that you round up a whole bunch of ferals, you just throw out some old cheap red wine.
Barry, just a quick request. Are you acting as a commentator for any of the election coverage?
Channel 7.
Could you wear the eyebrows, son?
Oh, I might, if I can take them away. Why not?
I think that what's meant, Barry, is that you look better when you look like John Howard than when you look like yourself.
Have you thought of what John Howard would be like with a beard?
I'm going to have to stop you there and say 5 points. Well earned. In the last big protest before the election, 93 people arrested at the Jabiluka mine site this week all gave their names as John Winston Howard. In an attempt to round up the rogue John Howards, police tried dressing up as 93 Jeanettes and calling out through a megaphone, "Dinner's ready!" The cops originally overcounted. Some of the protesters they thought were dressed as John Howard were just Wilderness Society koalas who needed a good dry clean. Earlier today, an escape attempt failed after one John Howard tied 12 other John Howards together and lowered himself out a window. He still couldn't reach the ground. Unfortunately, one of the more violent protesters may have escaped. police ask that people be on the lookout for this man.
Actually, the amazing thing about John Howard is his nose is so strong, he took his hands away from the baby and stayed there. Hey, look what I can do. Give me a baby.
If it had been Kim, he wouldn't have been able to get near him. The baby would have just bounced off.
You need a whole creche.
It'd be horrible if Kim actually fell over then, wouldn't it? The good news is, the rest are still behind bars after 93 Peter Costellos refused to show up with bail. And in related news, a swarm of 93 Kim Beazleys entered a cake shop in Darwin and ate all the humble pie they could find. Julie, Ian, Natasha, you had the presents, the spear, and that voodoo doll.
Julie, please explain.
This spooky orange hair is forever going to be associated in this country with Pauline Hanson. And this is indeed spooky. It represents not actually presents, as presents. The strange presence of a spiritual being.
And this represents those who would bestow it upon her. They come from the islands. I think some of our indigenous friends who looked at the lady with red hair and said, we need presents to put a spook on the woman.
Never read bedtime stories to children.
Oh, no, Mum. Uncle Ian's going to read us the stories again.
He's got a great voice for reading stories.
Well, I thought that, you know, it could have been a harker, but no.
Oh, let's do a harker.
Some days I think you're that girl at camp that we just wanted to drown. Come on, let's run up a hill.
There are moments when you have insights that just are a little bit too sharp. An alleged curse placed on One Nation, and the allegation is made by a man, a candidate.
This guy turns up in his living room. Obviously, he's seeing ghosts, but what he doesn't realise is these are people wearing white sheets. They're not ghosts. They're not ghosts.
They do have it right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for them. One Nation Senate candidate Barry Evans says the party has been cursed, and he himself is being haunted by the presence of a South Sea Islander. I mean, what's the big deal? Everyone in One Nation is bothered by the presence of people from overseas. David Oldfield says the curse isn't a problem because you have to believe in curses for one to be able to harm you, which is odd because they don't believe in native title, but it scares the pants off them. There are also rumours that another One Nation candidate woke up with a shrunken head, but that wasn't a curse. It was just the vacuum taking its toll. Mikey Robbins, James O'Loughlin and Barry Jones scored a creepy 16 points. Vexed by Julie McCross and Ian Sinclair and Natasha Stott Despoja on a supernatural 17 points. I only did that because I wanted Barry to lose something for once in his life.
Trouble is, he gives the right answers. That's why it's always so difficult.
He's going to come back next week and play for the car.
So we say, don't forget, next week we'll be in the concert hall of the Sydney Opera House for two very special shows, and we'd love you to join us for an evening of unfettered depravity. For now, we leave you with the good news that it's been a very well-mannered election campaign. No insults, no mudslinging, no backstabbing. That'll happen as soon as Peter Costello and Simon Crean start their naked grabs for power. Good night.
It's Good News Week. Someone's dropped a bomb somewhere contaminated.